Hello everybody, welcome to Monday and welcome to another edition of Sun Dragon Tips and Tricks. Last week we started talking about the continental knitting style versus the English knitting style, and we talked about the knit stitch. Today I thought I'd start the conversation about the purl stitch. When I was learning to knit, I gave up on the continental because I said, how the heck do you purl? Like, knitting makes sense. How do you purl? And full disclaimer, this is not an intro knitting video. This is if you know how to knit and want to shift to continental. I recommend my intro knitting videos, learning to knit English style. If you want to dive straight into continental, give it a shot here. You might do just fine. You might be great. That's awesome. So, going back, there are a couple different ways I know of to continental purl. Again, I am not the expert. English style, I'm faster at English actually, whereas a lot of people say they're faster at continental. So I stick to English for the most part. But I'll show you what I do or how I muddle through continental if you want some tips on how to pick it up. Now, my favorite continental purling method is a specific one called Norwegian Purl, and we're going to hold off on that. We're not going to do it this week. We are going to do it next week. I thought last week about jamming them into the same video. I backed off of that. So anyway, so we're going to go over some basics if you want to do a more, like, I guess I would call traditional continental purling. And I'm sure there will be experts in continental knitting who will disagree with me. And I've seen continental, really fluid continental purling. That is just amazing. I'm teaching the basics if you're trying to pick it up, some tips and tricks that might help you adapt. You will find your own way to hold everything eventually, but this will get you started. So let's get to it. Continental purling. Now, a purl is essentially a backwards knit stitch. It is what you do when, say, you're doing stockinette, like the cowl I'm wearing. Stockinette is you knit, you want the front of all your knit stitches on one side and the back of all your knit stitches on the other side. So you want all the V's on one side, what I like to call the V's. That's the front of a knit stitch. The back, they look like little slashes. And when the slashes, or what I like to call turtlenecks, are facing you, kind of like these guys right here, you have to do a backwards knit stitch to make the front match. I explain a lot that in a little more detail, I believe, in my intro knitting English style videos. So today we are going to do the traditional Norwegian, which is really funky, but I absolutely love it. That's going to be next week. So tune in next week. We will talk about Norwegian. All of them, though, all of them have the same 4 steps as the English style. There's still, knit stitch has what I break down into 4 steps. So does the purl stitch. And it's the same idea as an English style knit stitch. Nothing really differs except for, because you're holding your tension in your left hand, the process to get it done needs to be a little bit different to make it look the same in the end. So it's step 2 of those 4 steps. Step 2, we have step 1 is to go into your stitch. Knitting, you go front to back. Purling, you go back to front. Again, it's that a lot of it is reverse. Step 2 is the wrapping the yarn. So we go in, we wrap around the needle, we pull the needle back out the way we came in, we reverse directions, we take it off. So wrapping the yarn around the needle, the method, not the direction, is what differs. The method of doing it. Here's the crazy thing, which it's like purling is a backwards knit stitch. However, just as with a knit stitch, you wrap the yarn counterclockwise. Knit or purl, the yarn is wrapped around the right needle counterclockwise. That's one thing that doesn't differ. You don't reverse that part of it, but it'll look different because your needle is pointing towards you rather than away from you. the needle that you're wrapping, which is my finger as opposed to my marker, it looks a little different because of the direction the needle's pointing. Now for continental purling, again, what I couldn't wrap my brain around is how do you keep everything in place with a purl stitch? It was really easy to do with the knit stitch because of the direction the right needle was going. I have a tip here and I'll show you and I'll do it. I use a finger, more specifically the pointer finger, the first finger on my left hand, to lock that wrap down. When I say a finger, the first finger on my left hand is what works for me. Now you might find something different works. So let's take a look at the pictures. So here are my two pictures just like last week. This is the front view. And then this is, so look, with the needles facing you, what you're directly looking at. If you tilted it to look down on it, if we were to look straight down on this right needle, so we've got left and right. This left needle doesn't change. I've just shifted it. This is left. That's my right. Here's what's happening. I'm going to color code these as I like to do. We've got the stitch on the needle. We've got the next stitch. A lot of these other stitches we're going to ignore, but we're still going to color code them. We've got the stitch we already completed. And let's say we've got what's hanging underneath. And we've got our working yarn. So with the tilted picture here, if we tilt this around, so what's here is suddenly what's there. Let's make sure we're still looking at the same stuff. Here's the loop we're working with. This is a picture of what everything looks like as we're about to start phase 2. So we've pushed the needle in from back to front. We're getting ready to wrap the yarn. Just to be clear. The next stitch, which we're going to ignore. The only other thing that's really visible right now are the purl stitches underneath from the row before. So what needs to happen here? Just like in the knit stitch, we need to wrap, let's say the working yarn was hanging off here. We need to wrap that working yarn counterclockwise around our right needle. And so whereas with the knit stitch, it went all the way around in between to make that happen because your right needle was back here. Your right needle's in front right now. So I reverse the language. I say that it needs to go between and around. It still needs to go. I'm going to try to thicken that up there a little bit. You're starting in front and you end up back in front. So you need to go between and around. And it doesn't matter English or continental style, that is what needs to happen. So you start here, wrap around that right needle, counterclockwise. So let's take a look at English versus continental. So the English style of knitting, your yarn is held off to the right. Let's color code everything. We have the stitch we're working with. Other stitches, the next one coming up, the one we have just done. All the little purl bumps underneath that we don't really need to worry about. And our working yarn. Now, this working yarn, again, with the English style of knitting, you need to throw it or flick it but it needs to go around. I call it going between the needles and around this right needle. And then steps 3 and 4 of ducking it back under and away and taking it off can happen. Now for Continental, yarn needs to be in front. In both of these, the yarn being in front can throw things off a little bit. It makes what we're looking at with Continental, you're holding the yarn, you're holding that working yarn off to the left. It's crossing in front of some of your stitches, so it's hard to see them, but that's okay because you're not messing with them. Like this next stitch that's coming up, he's kind of hard to see, but we're working with this one right now, so that's okay. Same setup as before. The yarn's just in a different place. Now, to some extent, you can do exactly what you did before on the Continental knitting stitch. You can pick it with your needle, in which case your needle tip would, again, same direction as with the knit stitch, just the yarn is in front, is near you right now, instead of away from you. You're going to go under and pick it back up again. Now what can be really tricky, well, let's write this in first. We're going to so I've put over here, you're going to pick the yarn from back to front, you're going to scoop under. However, that ducking back under and away, step 3, can be kind of tricky with a Continental Purl. It's what kept me from doing it for so long. So I recommend to secure your working yarn with your finger. And that's what I've drawn right here. So to break down what I have, so you scoop under and then lock it in place. This will be much easier to show y'all when I get over to the real yarn, but to do a little color coding, here's the stitch that we've ducked into. Here's the last stitch that was completed. But this is the working yarn that we have scooped under, but to make sure it doesn't pop off, I'm also holding it down with my finger. That's my finger right there, in case you couldn't tell. That's my finger, holding it down. So scoop under, lock it in place so you can duck back away. I use my fingers all the time in my knitting. The needles are not the only tools here. But that's what I recommend doing. So let's see what that looks like with yarn that's all one color. Let's try to replicate what we did last week. And last week I showed you a few English style knit stitches before I showed you the Continental knit. So let's do the same with the purl. Now the mechanics of the purl are the same for either English or Continental. Knitting, you go front to back through this loop, through the front part of the loop. Purling, you reverse that. You go back to front. I like to keep things at a 90-degree angle. Makes things easier. With English style, we're holding over here. We're going to go between and around. Again, counterclockwise. Duck out the way you came in. So reverse your actions. Take it off. Again, one more time. Back to front, if I could stop from splitting my yarn. Between and around. Duck back and out and slide off. Now let's say we held the yarn over here. And Continental, English I can kind of pick up and let go of my tension. Continental I like to keep permanent tension. So remember, I do that funky thing from crochet. I palm up, I come between my pinky and my ring finger, wrap around my pinky and back, over my ring finger and down behind my first 2 fingers. Gives me some control. Now purling, yarn has to be in the front.
See, I'm making some assumptions with this. I'm assuming you already kind of know how to knit. This is what I'm talking about with my finger. If my finger is under here holding tension, I can crook it towards myself, and I have some mobility with it. So I'm going to bring it down so you can see what's happening. Back to front, scoop it or just let it fall over. But let's try this. If I hold it out a little bit, back to front, scoop under, just like with knitting, I scoop under. I still have that counterclockwise motion. But this can be really easy to have it fall off. How do I do step 3? So back to front, scoop under. I pull my finger over the top here to lock it down so it stays in place when I back it away and slide it off. You get a little more, not so much tension there. Let me hold it so you can see it. Back to front, scoop under, lock it down, pull it away. I know some people who get into a rhythm and they don't even need as many steps as I'm showing you. So I've got my finger over it to pull it away so I can see what's going on. Back to front, release, lock, scoop under. My finger's here if I need it. Slide away. Pulling it out of the way so you can see. Back to front, scoop under, lock it down, pull it away. Again, the biggest thing, the most important thing, I can go, let me finish my sentence. The most important thing is that it's wrapping counterclockwise. If I hold up like this, I'm coming from underneath everything. I'm still getting that loop right. Lock it down. So I don't even have to pick it if I keep this up, but I need to keep it in front. Come under. Lock it down, pull it away, let it slide off. I can pull it out of the way if I want to see what's happening. Back to front, around, up and over and around, and lock it down, pull it away, off. No matter where my yarn is, it's in the front, but I'm not paying attention to it. I'm paying attention to the loop under here. I push in, then I can lock it down counterclockwise. If I look, this yarn is counterclockwise, and finish my row. There are my purl stitches with their little turtleneck bumps. So that was lesson 1 on continental purling, a more traditional purl. Like I said, I'm sure you're going to find people who do continental purling all kinds of fun ways and have ways of locking it down or picking or wrapping it so that they get the most fluidity of motion. I love my English style knitting, so I tend to stick to that, and I'm a little more fluid in English style. But those are some tips and tricks to get you started. Now next week, we're going to talk Norwegian Purl, which looks like kind of crazy voodoo magic, but I love it. It changes the tension of my purl stitches, but it's a way, you keep your yarn in the back, even though your yarn is supposed to be in front when you purl. So that's my teaser for next week if you want to learn Norwegian purling. However, if you're just getting going with continental knit and purl, practice all of it to get the hang of it, to see what you like. But Norwegian purling's kind of fun for when you have to do ribbing instead of moving your yarn back and forth a whole lot. You don't have to do that. Anyway, I'll let y'all have a fun day for today. I hope you enjoyed continental purling, or at least starting to wrap your brain around it. Let me know if there's anything you would like a video on. Contact me if you'd like a virtual lesson, or if you'd like to schedule a lesson if you're local to Brevard outside of the shop. And may your crafting be filled with joy and confidence. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe if you like. Our subscriptions are growing, which is really fun. We just love growing the Sun Dragon community. Check out the sideshow if you want to see Liz and I being kind of silly and maybe offering some advice there. And yeah, craft on. Find it any way you can to help you out during this crazy time. crafting is my joy and my life, and I get caught up on what to even say about it, but I love being able to share it with others. So, we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye. You're looking awfully innocent there on my sweater, huh? Can you tell me anything about this? Why all these balls of yarn are not in there? That looks as I plead the fifth.